Thanks for joining us today to talk about mastering project KPIs. This whole series is set, and we'll talk about kind of other ones coming up on helping empower MSPs and other technology service providers to learn more about project management and the project management basics. Throughout the year, we want to cover subjects ranging from goal setting to trends to how to price projects, different structures moving from time and material to fixed fee, and just all the different options that MSPs have. So check back on our website because we're always having events like this at least once a month to help with project management education. And today, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll introduce our guests. Today we've got Bagdonas, who's here from the Moovila team. He's our senior program manager, working with MSPs every single day. He spends hours and hours every week helping onboard MSPs to perfect project. He also consults with them on best practices, and he's seeing trends from MSPs of all sizes. We currently work with accounts as small as like 5-man shops to significantly larger service providers. So Lewis is seeing trends across the board, and he came from manufacturing where he saw a lot of other project management trends and technology experiences in the past. We also have with us today Rob Hurd, who is a senior executive coach at PAX 8. Rob started his career at Y2K Project and advanced through roles all the way from help desk to vice president, which is kind of awesome. We see a lot of people advancing in the project management space. He was vice president specifically in Toronto's financial district. He has expertise in both technical and business realms from large and small. He founded his own MSP in 2015 and had a strong client base and with recurring revenue, and post-sale, he's leveraged his experience to work with PAX 8 on coaching and helping people transform their own MSP models. With that, I'll turn it over then to help you guys learn about KPIs.
Perfect. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Kate.
And,
Thanks.
Y'all probably seen me before, so I'll try to be brief and just let Rob do all the talking. We're lucky enough that Rob picks up the phone when we call, and a lot of what we've learned in the MSP space and best practices, we bounce a lot of that off Rob. So Rob, we really appreciate you being here with us today.
Appreciate it, Lewis. I mean, I see the value that you folks are delivering to the community, and love the fact that you're presenting these types of thought leadership that's really giving back to the community. So happy to be here, happy to help.
So today, we thought we would break down KPIs at a few different levels. We'd look at it at a ticket or a task level, depending which PSA you're in. And again, this is going to be a PSA agnostic talk track here. And then we'll jump to the KPI by project level. And then what are some KPIs look like at the portfolio level? So jumping right into it with KPIs at the ticket level, the first one that we've got on our list here is margin. And you'll probably hear us say that word a lot today, margin, margin, margin. What are those budgeted hour estimates? How long did you think each ticket within the project was going to take you? That goes from number of hours, correct resource type. We talk a lot with a lot of people as well too about do we look at margin with just labor, or do we look at margin with a blended rate of labor and hardware? So, there's standards out there percentage wise, but Rob, I'll hand it over to you and let us know what you think about margin at a ticket level and maybe what some percentages and key things we should be looking out for.
Sure, absolutely. When we talk about opportunity for margin, you're right. I mean, the problem with, again, dependent on fixed fee versus time and materials projects, when we're selling labor on a per unit, right? So that's our kind of time and materials. It really doesn't matter whether we're selling 1 hour or 100 hours. Our gross margin on that is kind of fixed. Lewis brought up a really interesting point, though, is we have a little bit of variability in that depending on who we have working that task or ticket. And so it's extremely important that we're not only looking at the budget, but who's the right skill set. I mean, is it best use of our technicians' time to have a very expensive L3 resource going through and unboxing and benching equipment? Not to say that that's something that they can't do, but when we're concerned about profitability, is it really their best and highest use of their time?
So what's actually interesting, I've been seeing a lot is a lot of people are kind of changing the way they set up the financials on their projects to whether it's a fixed fee or time material to preset whatever that work role or resource type is so
Mhm.
that they can bill and map to the correct GL within their financial system. How does that relate within a project at a ticket level?
So are we talking about the resource cost allocation?
Yeah, I mean, really like to your point, right? When we should be using an L1 versus an L3, making sure that we have the correct resource on there. And then I'm seeing people start to use that as forecasting for their billing as well too.
It's forecasting on billing, and I know that we're going to cover this as
Yeah,
well, but it
yeah,
also allows then forecasting for resource capacity.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a great point. Now, and I'll make sure we keep moving here, but on margin, one thing, I think when we get to a project level and a portfolio level, we'll definitely talk about what are those target margin percentages and
Hmm.
what is it just on labor? Do you have any opinions, Rob, on do we take a hit on one ticket at 15% so that we can make sure we keep things moving and maybe we try to make it up elsewhere? Or are you kind of along the thought process that every ticket should be running at a specific margin target?
I would strongly encourage repetitive projects to have a consistent margin across the project. Um, there's oftentimes that partners are introducing brand new projects. Maybe I've never done a SharePoint migration before. Maybe I've never done an email migration before. And so we are going to see that variability at the ticket level for true gross margin, right? What we thought, again, based on our budgeted hours, we thought something was going to take an hour completely within scope, no change management, which is obviously something we're going to talk about in a minute. Um, we just blew out the budget. It was 3 hours because we misscoped that ticket. And so we're hoping to be able to make up those 2 additional hours somewhere else. And obviously, we have the goal that the larger the project, the easier it is to make up those 2 hours.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point, right? Make sure you can see that, keep an eye on it, and recover elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So next point we have here, and this is a term that I've used in the manufacturing space. So we were a contract manufacturer, and we would get graded by our customers on OT and C, on time and complete, right? How many of your POs that you produced were on time, and what percentage of them were complete, right? And that you had a range within 5% plus or minus. And I started using it, in the manufacturing space, the one we started working on some different projects, how many of our projects are on time and complete? And I've started to talk about it with some partners in the industry, and that it's taking a little bit for, I think, for people to get used to, just because we're talking now more about the duration of the
Mm-hmm.
ticket and not so much the margin, right? So margin's more the budgeted hours, how long is it going to take? But duration is over what period of time to get that done. So even at a ticket level, we would encourage to start looking at how accurate are you on your duration. If you think that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's going to take you one day, does it take you one day or does it end up taking you 2, 3, 4 days, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Lewis. I mean, again, part of this as we start taking a look at our metrics based on a per project or per portfolio, um, these small and what might seem to be minute deviations in things like duration have a cascading and potentially, you know, negative, big negative impact on the whole project deliverable.
Yeah, and then we always like to say, and I know we're on a ticket here, and I won't try not to get too far ahead of myself, but no project is an island, right? We have to look at it a
Mhm.
portfolio. So those delays on a ticket level could impact the project, and then that impact on that project could impact another project that you have within the portfolio as well, too.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So last one here on a ticket, change management. And this is always a tricky one, right? And Rob, you mentioned it earlier, right? How accurate are we on our scoping? And
Hmm.
it's really having the targets in place for your team. And I think margin and on time and complete would tie into this as well, too, to know
Hmm.
that, hey, I'm starting to go over, I'm starting to lose on margin, I'm starting to take longer than I thought. Having those in place and those targets and goals so that you know when change management needs to occur, right?
Sure.
All right, so let's jump up to the project. And we've got some more here. Of course, we're going to see some repetitive KPIs that we're going to talk about throughout here, margin, on time, and complete. But the first one we wanted to touch on was at a project level,
Hmm.
what is the right number of tickets and what is the right number of tasks? So we see this all across the board, right? We
Hmm.
see folks that might run a 300-hour project off of 4 project tickets. They've got a PM ticket, an engineering ticket, client communication, and something else. And then we see people that have 50 tickets for a 6-hour project, and we're going
Hmm.
down to the 15 and 30-minute range here. So, Rob, do you have any recommendations, things that you coach and teach around of what is it, what should be a ticket or one single piece of work within a project?
Absolutely. So starting at the time level, I would say I would never create a ticket that needs less than 30 minutes of time. Where I would define a ticket as a kind of little fence around it, I would say that it is one resource and one deliverable. And the reason we want to do that is this allows us a one-to-one scheduling within our PSA of that project ticket. Now, in most cases, most PSAs or most project management systems are going to allow us to do dependencies. So we can drive that forward. But the goal is that the single ticket is a single technical resource and a single outcome, and then cascading down from there.
Which is great. I wrote that down again. I think I write it down every time you say it because I get asked all the time, right? It
Yeah.
is number one philosophical project question we get asked, right? What's the
Hmm.
right number of tickets? And we do a lot with a lot of people where we'll build out a big project and then we'll build out a smaller version of the same project and then talk through what are the pros and cons and in between. So as
Sure.
far as the minimum for a ticket or that fence that we talked about, what
Hmm.
would your recommendation be on how large we allow that to get?
That's a tough one, Lewis, because it really depends on the scope of the project,
Yeah.
right? And so um, the one thing that we haven't necessarily spoken about would be phases,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so when does a project logically break into phases versus just a whole long list of tickets? And so setting up things like key milestones and deliverables defining each of those phases are going to help us, one, from a visual perspective, right? We can say, okay, this phase is done. Um, that's important as well, is that when we move our organization towards phase-based billing, Now we have a collection of tickets that the client has agreed that it's reached a percent complete, and now we're billing for that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point too. And I think that's how large you get it would depend on how you're billing. That's a really good point, right? Because you don't want to have a one big ticket that just continues to get hours and hours and hours on it, and you can't bill it until it's complete, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So from there to margin, I think
Mm-hmm.
again, labor versus hardware, what you're looking at, so I do see some people look at margin differently at a project level versus fixed fee versus time material. I think you would agree with me here that our margin should be our margin no matter how we bill for it, right?
I completely agree. Um, where we have some flexibility, right, is the fact that time and materials really is there's no upside to us as an MSP. We're
Yep.
billing for what we use. Where fixed fee, we have an agreed upon price, and based on efficiency and potentially automation, we're now able to reduce the expected hours that we're billing for internally and our labor cost and increase that margin. Now, that's typically for organizations that are great at a project closeout process. They're improving their scopes and they're doing repeatable projects, right? We're really good at saying, hey, listen, you have an on-premise file server and we're moving you to SharePoint. We do this all the time. Don't worry, we know what we're doing. And we can tell based on folder structure, size, and potentially internet connection on site, how much that project is really going to take for us to deliver.
Yeah. Now, what about this might be top five philosophical questions we get asked, right? Is I it's do we take on a project that we're going to have a low margin at because it's going to help us win recurring revenue or business elsewhere? What's your thought or take on that?
So you're right. This really does become that philosophical. It really depends on where you are as an MSP. Are you at the, and I do apologize if this is a little brash, it's the, is any revenue good revenue?
Yep.
And we're using it as an opportunity, a foot in the door, prove ourselves, prove to the client how great we are in hopes that we're going to land the managed services? Or are we okay with walking away from a one-off project that we may make some money on without the guarantee that we're going to get that recurring revenue managed services coming out of this? The chances are that you may be helping somebody else land that client and making them better by delivering that project without the guarantee of managed services afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, you could also argue if it's a new customer, right, and you're going to take a hit on margin to be able to get the deal, you then set that expectation of what you're going to charge for specific projects through
Mm-hmm.
potentially the life of that relationship. So that's definitely another thing to consider.
Sure.
Put you on the spot here because I know
Yep.
everyone's probably wondering it. Margin percentage, what's the industry standard? What's the target? What's the goal? Now, if it's a total secret,
No,
you can.
no.
Okay.
I'll give some round figures
Sure.
as a target. And so what I would say is there are different targets depending on how we're pricing this. So if we're looking at the project's perspective, what I would be targeting for fixed fee projects would be around 40% gross margin. And just as a clarification, there may be folks on here that are not folks that are drilling through P&Ls all the time. Gross margin is calculated as revenue minus hard costs minus labor cost. So that's our gross margin. So in and around 40% for our fixed fee, and interestingly enough, 45% for time and materials.
Huh.
And that may be shocking to some. It may be completely clear to others. As MSPs, we are not great at fixed fee projects. We often price them too low. We often do not truly appreciate things like the time it's taking us to do the project management of it. And so with a consistent reporting, there's opportunity to get better on fixed fee, but traditionally in the industry, we actually see better margin in time and materials.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And you make a great point there is charging for the time it actually takes to manage the project, right? That's one where a lot of people will kind of just sink that cost into
Mhm.
their SG&A, their general overhead. And I think we are, as we continue to talk about it, hopefully we're helping the industry recognize that it is a valuable piece of the project. And I'm going to kind of combine the next two KPIs here. We've got that on time and complete again at the project level, right? When did you say that you were going to hit, when you were going to deliver the project and how
Mhm.
close to doing that? And then CSAT score, right? And project management is a lot of that. You know,
Mhm.
it's the communication with the client, managing the project, seeing the delays and issues proactively, because I've had to do it a million times. It never gets easier when you have to call the client the day of and be like, you know how we said we were going to be up and going tomorrow? Well, it's going to be 2 months late. So, and I think the CSAT SAT score that plays into as well something you mentioned earlier. How efficient are you at your project closeout? Are
Mhm.
you taking the time, right? Is that are you taking the time to review your project, see how you did, but also reach out to the customer and say, hey, did we deliver what we said we were going to deliver? Were you satisfied with the communication there?
Absolutely. One slight add to this, as MSPs, we are really great at getting feedback from our external stakeholders, right? And so during our project closeout process, we're going in and we're saying, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, or here's one of our tools that we're leveraging to get that CSAT. I would encourage the folks that are on the call to think about a internal satisfaction. And so is this an opportunity to reach out to our project engineers and say, what would you change? Right? Or how did we do as a team? And
Yeah.
by getting that feedback, that's an incredible functionality to be able to deliver the project better the next time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I would help prevent turnover, burnout,
Mhm.
right? Make them feel like they're part of it, and not just keep piling work on them, right?
Sure. Yep.
The and we don't talk that much about the managed service side between our conversations. I know you are an expert at it, right? But I'm sure there are clear benchmark CSAT scores within, the ticket by ticket on the help desk side. Is it the same sort of goal, do you think, within an MSP for CSAT between your projects and your help desk and your tickets?
So the interesting thing around CSAT, Lewis, is really that response rate, right? And so we roll the dice too often on our service side, and we might get a 6% response rate, right?
Hmm.
If we're doing really well, 10% if we're incredible at it, um, because we send out a lot of surveys, right? MSPs are closing tickets, and every closed ticket, or sometimes every interaction, has that little survey link at the bottom, right? With a project, I would really be driving towards getting 100% response,
Mhm.
because the feedback we're getting from the client is going to continue to improve our operational process. Were they happy with the level of communication? Were they happy with the detail of the communication? Right? Were we providing weekly updates that was nothing but geek speak? And our point of contact happened to be the CFO, right? So it's those types of what might be considered small bullets of or nuggets of information really allow us to improve the relationship with our client.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. So with that, and I know we've got a couple questions out there, and let's run through KPIs by portfolio, and then we'll get into some of the questions. I skipped over, sorry, this last box we had here on project efficiency. What we're kind of thinking about there is there a way to combine that margin or budget target with your, time, how were you on your delivery date, and then also that CSAT score. So you might have, as you continue to track these more, of course, budget's going to be something that's very, measurable. So is time, CSAT score, to Rob's point, we've got to work to get that feedback from the customers. But maybe we start thinking about combining those three things to give
Mhm.
ourselves a project efficiency score that is just, one number for leadership to look at, for us to have a quick view across the portfolio, how we did.
Yeah, like a project scorecard, right?
Yeah.
Or a report card. And like you said, if we weight the KPIs potentially evenly, then, maybe each is 33%. And now we have our score out of 10.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'd be interested to see there as well too is how time and CSAT score interact with each other, right? Because if
Yeah.
you're doing a good PM job, even if you are super late, you still could have a great CSAT score, right? Because
Hmm.
you could be calling your customer every day and saying, hey, this is going on, this is happening, it's delayed because of equipment, it's not on us. I mean, I'd be interested to see the correlation between those two.
Yeah. And I think the important part on any of these KPIs, and, we'll drill into it again at the portfolio level, is the importance of tracking this data for trending purposes.
Yeah.
Are we getting better or are we getting worse?
Yeah. Yeah, and then that's the big thing, right? We want to continue to improve. We want to continue to get better and continue to grow the business.
Yeah.
So let's jump to the portfolio. We've got some common themes here. Margin, right? We're gonna that 40% that you mentioned there, Rob, on a fixed fee at a project level. I would hope we would look at that the same way across the
Hmm.
portfolio. Yeah. Revenue goals. So, are you budgeting? Are you setting your revenue goals for a project for the year? Maybe you start with a yearly number and then you start to dive in and look at those on a month by month basis. Would you think, Rob, you'd want to get any more granular than revenue goals by month?
I I wouldn't say so. If we're looking at both revenue and margin, um, I would encourage our folks to also take a look at it by project type,
Yeah.
because maybe there are specific types of projects that we do really well at because it's something that we have the right skill set, we have the right standard operating procedure, we have an incredibly dialed in scope and project template. It's very possible that projects can live at different growth stages,
Hmm.
but there are key metrics that you can pull out of a mature project process and help your immature projects or ones that you're just starting out to try to deliver to your clients.
Yeah, that's a great point. What's going well on these, and then what can we use that translates to some that might not be going as well?
Mhm.
So the next one over there, budget accuracy. I know you had mentioned it there, Rob, and it's, of course, how well does our performance on the project match what we scoped, what we put in front of our customer, and how we thought we would do? Would you
Mhm.
look at budget accuracy, of course, on a project by project level, and then how do you start to think about that at the portfolio? level? Is it, we feel like, 9 out of 10 projects we ran this month, we were spot on our budget? Or do you look at it by hours? Do you look at it by, margin?
I I would actually look at it at the revenue and margin, Lewis, and the
Okay.
reason for it is I could run 100 projects that are $2,000 in revenue and be off by 5%, or I could run $100,000 project and be off by 5%. And my apologies that my example doesn't have accurate math in it, but that one large project being off the exact same percent could be detrimental from a financial perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then that ties right into the next one there on starting to think about some template KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to jump to the second one there. Percent of projects reviewed to update templates and scope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is one that you've pushed on us. And I wouldn't say pushed, you've shared with us. And we help, because we help push that on others and tell them, hey, you should have a ticket at the end of each project to give
Mm-hmm.
yourself time to go back and review what happened and update your sales team for those scopes, review your templates, update those templates. I've got a wild guess here, but what
Mm-hmm.
would you say your percentage KPI would be on that one?
If you want to be efficient, that's 100%.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Every project. Anything else you want to add on that, or did I cover it okay?
No, I think you covered it completely, right? I've used the term closeout process. And really what we're trying to do is capture lessons learned, doing things like updating a risk register that's really helping us. If we fell on our face, let's not do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not enjoyable.
No.
Anything we can do to prevent it would be nice, right?
Yep.
So then in that same bucket there, we've got one on at the portfolio level, what percentage of projects were created using templates? And you've talked about it and alluded to it a lot in here of those products, updating those templates, those offerings that we're really good at that might become fixed fee
Mm-hmm.
projects. I know that this is a depends question for sure,
Sure.
but what percentage of projects would you say should be created from templates?
So this might be a not expected answer, but I'd actually say 100%.
Okay.
And here's the reason why. Every single project that we deploy have consistent items. There's always a kickoff meeting with the client. There's always a kickoff meeting internally. And towards the end, there is our billing and our closeout process. So if we're not in the habit of applying project templates, that's the way to start. Is let's have the consistent framework that we know we are going to do on every single project. And then depending on your PSA, be able to layer in the more detailed information.
Sure. That's great. So 100 and 100.
There you
So
go.
clear goals to track against. All right. Last option here, last bullet point here, and then we'll jump into questions. We've got a couple out there, which is great. We appreciate the interaction. So resource utilization. I
Mhm.
put this at the portfolio level. What are did I put it at the right spot here? Do you think it's at a more of a project level? What are your thoughts there?
No, projects, in my opinion, projects are transient revenue, right? I mean, we got to go out, we got to sell it, um, in hopes that most of the folks that are on the call are leaning towards that recurring revenue. And we may not be at the point where we have dedicated resources for projects. we need to factor in resource utilization for both engineers and project managers. And we need to look at it as an organization, because when those folks are not working on projects, tickets, account management, whatever other roles that we have them doing, we're still paying them, but that labor cost is now coming out of our pocket versus being able to bill for that time.
Yeah. Yeah, and you say that, and a thought slash question came into my head about, and we don't have to, we could probably talk about this for a while, but how do you, and I think this kind of goes into one of the questions that Sean had asked in here of how do you see MSPs have project engineers be their own project managers, is how do we start to think about for those shared resources that maybe you have a dispatch manager or a senior engineer that does some of the PMing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start to look at their utilization in each of those separate roles?
It really comes down to detailed time entry, and then after the fact reporting.
Okay.
A smaller organization may not be able to afford a person who is a dedicated project manager. But if within the project we have the capabilities of having our project engineers, who are billable resources, tracking how much time they're spending in that project manager role or wearing that project manager hat, it's going to allow us to then reflect at the portfolio level, how much time did I lose using a project engineer as a project manager? What was the cost of that? And at what point in time do I realize that financially I should be able to afford taking that time, putting it onto a new head count, and freeing up those engineers to be able to deliver more projects?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you just solved 6, 8, 9, 10 different issues there, right? Making sure you're charging for PM time, utilizing engineers in the right way, right? And I've gotten asked this question recently a lot too, and they say, well, who should schedule their own work, PMs or engineers? And I said, well, you're not paying your engineers to schedule their work, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want them to be doing the technical work that they know how to do.
Yep.
Think you guys are segueing well into our questions. I know
That
you have
was
one
totally
more
planned, Kate.
one
Absolutely.
more slide, but I want to make sure we have time because I see a lot of questions
No,
come
that's
in.
okay. Let's go through all we were going to say here, right, is we had some common themes, right? If y'all can take anything away from what we're talking about today to start tracking on your projects, margin at a ticket project portfolio level, delivery time, are you hitting your due dates when you say you're going to finish it? And then what's your customer satisfaction, right? Are they happy with how you communicated? Did you hit your deliverables? So if we can, I know we talked about a lot of different things, but if we could just focus on 3, someplace to start, right? I know it can be hard if we're not tracking these today, right? Pick a couple. These would be probably my top 3.
Yeah. No, I'd agree, Lewis. This is a great starting point.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna start bringing some template or some questions. Sorry, there's discussion on templates. Because we've got them in a few different spots. So one of them, this kind of goes off of what you were saying towards the end, Rob, about if
Mm-hmm.
you have project engineers or not. Do you see MSPs have project engineers be their own project managers? I guess
So
this is smaller.
yes, definitely, across the partner base that I work with personally and some of the other coaches work with, um, it is a size constraint. A lot of folks can't, as I said, can't afford to have a dedicated project manager. The one caution that I would have with project engineers doing their own project management is make sure that there is some type of executive or leadership level oversight, because project engineers, because they're the ones delivering the work product, when it comes to CSAT, may not solicit the right information, or it may come back filtered. So you can either have a peer review during that closeout process or an executive sponsor who's stepping in and collecting feedback from the client.
Makes sense.
We see as well too, even for organizations that have project managers, if they have a mini project or a smaller project that's maybe 6 to 8 hours, under 8 hours, PM might just keep an eye on it and let
Hmm.
do too much PMing on it. But yeah, there's a little bit of oversight, but yeah, they can run some of those smaller projects.
Um, could you provide recommendations for enhancing accuracy of project management hour forecasts within the context of a fixed fee margin?
I would say a good place to start is 20% of total project budget. And then it becomes a iterative process to scale down or potentially scale up the number of hours in PM. I would also encourage us to make sure that we are tracking what the PM is doing as PM time. So whether that's internal meetings, vendor discussions, leadership discussions, all of that is truly PM time. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah.
I think you covered it.
In terms of optimizing resource utilization for project managers, are there any best practices based on your experience regarding the ideal number of projects a project manager should handle? How does this recommended number vary based on the size or the complexity of the projects? The recommended number of projects is a very hard one.
So what I've seen be very successful is actually a sprint style methodology for scaling, or sorry, for scoring projects. And so maybe a simple, say simple infrastructure deployment might be considered a 2 or a 3 out of 5, and a office move might be a full 5 out of 5. And so working towards understanding the capacity of your project managers, if you have multiple ones, this starts introducing that variability of, okay, I'm a fresh out of school PMP, and so I understand the theory, but maybe not the practical. And I don't have a lot of workspace experience, so I might not be as efficient versus, somebody like Lewis who's got quite a few years experience. Not too many though.
No,
And
I'm
and would be an incredibly efficient project manager.
Makes sense.
yeah, kind of like what Rob was talking about with what is that one project that you can knock out of the park every time over and over. It runs like clockwork, right? Maybe have a new PM. They're just churning through those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let them get their feet under them. Let them just churn those over and over and over. Yeah. And I would probably think, Rob, too, it depends on the customer. Not all customers are created equally, right? Some are a little needy
Yeah,
compared
a
to
little
others.
high touch versus just send me an email at the end of the week and let me know how things are going.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Awesome. Well, this is our last question, and we are coming right up on time, so this is definitely going to be our last. But I'll provide information on where you can reach out to our speakers. If you work out of templates and consistently use them to scope out projects, how do you prepare for something you have never done but needs a quote to make a bid? What do you begin with if it is an uncharted territory that your MSP is dipping into? And our engineers have never ventured into this area. Sorry, they sent it in a couple parts. So
Um,
like uncharted
wha-
territory, but
yep.
templates. How did they address that?
So I'm going to add one component and then come back into templating. The first thing I would strongly encourage is that we're pricing this in a time and materials basis and setting a reasonable budget expectation for the client with very detailed budget run communication. For the template, there really isn't a template for a brand new project, right? As I could kind of alluded to earlier, we have our kickoff process, we have our closeout process. So that definition of, am I using 100% templates? Yes, because those are the things we're going to do on every project. What I would encourage, though, is as part of the closeout process, we've captured the time, we've captured the tasks, we go back in and create a template for that project.
And one thing that I see in instances like that is usually when the sales team goes out and sells something and then it turns into a project, and the operations team might get it and say, what? What is we've never done this. What are you talking about? What is this? Right? Okay. Seems like that resonated a little bit with Brendan there. So, you know, as much as you can get the operations team involved in that scoping, right?
Mm.
Because they're the ones that you can say, hey, what similar types of project have we done that we can maybe go back and look at and pull some information from? So just really trying to get those two teams together when you're scoping that project.
Awesome. Well, I've just shared some info. I know sometimes we do a demo at the end, but since we had a guest on today, we wanted to kind of just leave it off of that. But I have shared a way to book a demo if you'd like to learn more about Moovila. I've also shared where you can learn more information about Pax8 Academy and Rob's group. And then lastly, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is a regular webinar series for us. I'm about to drop the link to our March session, which is up on the website as of yesterday. So if you're interested and you liked what you saw today and you'd like to talk about standardizing your project services and learn more about that next time with Lewis, you can join us on March 22nd at 1 p.m. And with that, do you guys have any last words for our guests?
My words are just thanks, Rob. As always, it's a pleasure. I even learn new things on this call every time I talk to you, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lewis. I'm very happy to be given the opportunity. Moovila is an incredible partner, and really happy to see that had really great engagement here. Thank you so much for everybody who's attended.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And we do send out, I mentioned this at the beginning, we send out the recording. The recording should come out on Monday to everybody. So if you enjoyed it, or I know some people had trouble logging in, I'm so sorry. You can catch the beginning or share it with a friend through that recording link that will come through on Monday. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.